welcome to the Bill Cartwright Show with Steve Cohen. Our special guest today is Dr. Gary Nelson. Gary, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Bill.
Hey, Gary, what's really interesting is that even though we know people, we grow up with them and go to school with them, but we don't really know their background, not really. So I'm really curious to know where you grew up and a little bit about your parents.
About my parents?
Of course.
Well, I grew up in San Francisco, not far from USF, about a mile from USF. And back, I was born in 1940, so that gives you an idea of the time element that I grew up in and the type of situation in San Francisco at that time. My dad was a fantastic athlete. He was the alternate at 17 for the Munich Olympics, the 1936 Olympics.
Wow.
In pole vault. He had the high school pole vault record in San Francisco for, I don't know, decades. And went to Stanford on a scholarship. Actually, he went to Montezuma first, which was the old way of going to a JC before going to a college. So he went there for a year, and then went to Stanford and competed at Stanford with Ben Eastman, and the two of them used to be sent on the road as the entire Stanford track team, with Eastman doing all the running races up until the mile when Dad would run the mile and do the pole vault. So, so he was an All-American, good guy. Passed away, about 15 years ago. Mom was typical mom in those days. She raised 4 children and worked as a doctor's assistant, and she also was really a good athlete. In a time when women athletes weren't thought of as such. But she won the San Francisco city tennis championships, which was kind of cool, I believe. But and she could still beat me in a 50-yard dash, when I was 15 years old. So I was kind of the blim of the family as far as athletics went.
Can you talk about yourself as a high schooler? What kind of kid were you? Were you a sports kid, academic kid? What kind of kid were you?
Kind of in between, I guess. I seem to remember getting really good grades, but we pulled out a couple of old report cards, and what I used to think was straight A's, was closer to a mix. So, the memory has a way of increasing your the way that you look at yourself. I played athletics in high school and in junior high school. But just kind of an average jock, good enough to make teams and to win some stuff, but never good enough to want to devote my life to it. I actually boxed Golden Gloves from the time I was maybe 13 till I was 21, and that was my main focus in athletics. I played some basketball, played some golf, did a lot of swimming, and and was proficient at all those, but not not a star at any one of them. Kind of a jack of all trades. Now my brother, who was 5 years younger than I was, won the tremendous athlete. He won the San Francisco High School pole vaulting championships 2 years out of the 4 that he was in the high school, and also the the diving coach saw him doing a flip off the pole into a sawdust pit, and said, "Do you dive?" And he said, "Well, no." So they taught him about 3 or 4 dives, and he went out and came in second in the San Francisco diving championships. Uh, he also, Bob was won the North Coast surfing championships for, I think, I don't know, they almost retired the thing. He kept winning it so much, but he was a great athlete. But oddly enough, Bill, we never competed in the same sports. I high jumped, he pole vaulted. I boxed, he wrestled. It just was like that all the way along. So we had a very good relationship.
Oh, wow. Hey, can you talk about the Maritime Academy?
Well, yeah, I can do that. Maritime Academy was well, it was kind of interesting. My grandfather was kind of the patriarch of our family, and he had 3 daughters, and what were uh, and no sons. And in those days, the daughters didn't take over the family businesses so much. So I think he saw in me somebody that would take over the business. He was an architect and a builder. In fact, about a third of the houses in Forest Hill District and Seacliff were built by him. And so in high school, well, by the time I was 13, I was doing most of his lettering on all of his plans and things, and working pretty close with him. And he had decided that I was going to be the one to take over his enterprises, and so I was all set to go to college, and I was in a very had been accepted to a kind of a prestigious college. And then in high school, right at the beginning of the high school, he passed away with a sudden heart attack. You'll enjoy this, Bill. He had at the time he had 2 Jaguars in 1958, and one of them was a sports car. So he went down to have a driver's test, and they found out that he had to actually take the test rather than just the written one. And he had brought his sports car, and he thought, "Oh God, they're going to look at this." Well, the man was like 78 years old, but he passed. But he came home, and I guess the stress of it was a little bit too much, and he had a massive heart attack, and he passed away that afternoon. With him went my funding for college, because his estate went into escrow, and so I had to quickly look around for a scholarship, and I got one through the Navy that allowed me to go to the Maritime Academy. And so I went there, and it was an interesting school. You went 3 straight years. So I graduated, before I was 21 years old from college, with a degree in engineering, and kind of a new outlook on life. I don't believe I was a military type person going in there, and I'm not sure I was really a military person as I left. But I had I was a lieutenant in the Navy, or a lieutenant JG in the Navy upon graduation, and had to give them 4 years for that education into the Navy. So that's what I did. As soon as I graduated from the Maritime Academy, I went into the Navy and the Merchant Marine, which was kind of a rough and tumble occupation in the early 1960s.
So what did you feel like you learned best while you were in the Merchant Marines? What that teach you?
Well, I mean, it was something. I mean, because here I was 21 years old, and I got on a ship, I in the Navy, I was in naval intelligence, but I got on this merchant marine ship that went in and out of Vietnam. This was in 1961, before we were in Vietnam. We were advisors. We had advisors there, and so I was on this ship making, about twice as much as the average engineer graduate would have made in a normal landside job. And I was 21 years old. The nearest person to me on that ship was 50. So I was thrust into a man's world, in a very rough world. I mean, these guys had gone through World War II, and and they were really, it was really, kind of an interesting thing. But for for my development, one, I had to learn that responsibility of how to deal with, as an officer, with people that were older than I was, considerably older than I was, and a lot more experience. And the other thing was that before I turned 22, I'd gone to 40 different countries, and in 1960, that just
Wow.
didn't happen. So, I was able to see the world, uh, the whole world, because the particular ship I was on, the Green Mountain State, was kind of a tramp steamer. And I was able to see that world, um, through the eyes of a young man, when not many Americans were traveling. By the time I was 22, I had been to 40 different countries, and seen things that nobody my age probably had seen. I grew up very fast in that year.
Yeah, I mean, you had a lot of to travel all those different countries. That's amazing. And can you talk about, so after you leave the Merchant Marines, can you talk about going to college? I think it was UOP and Carolina. How does that happen? That's a pretty big gap.
Yeah, well, and USF was in between that. So, well, like I say, I had an engineering degree, a Bachelor of Science in Engineering, and I had applied to, and I knew that the Merchant Marine was not going to be my life. It was absolutely great, in my early 20s, going around footloose and fancy free, and seeing all these different cultures, and making a whole lot of money, and compared to what other recent graduates, were doing. But I had a dentist who I had been very close to growing up. I had taken care of babysat his four boys, um, from the time that I was 13 on, or maybe even 12 on. And the boys were really ruly, and I could control them because I'd beat the shit out of them. Excuse me. And and they would behave me, and for me, and anyway, this dentist became a real mentor to me. So I had come back off a trip, and I had told him, I said, Doc, I said, I've applied to MIT and to Lehigh and Cornell and the California Institute of Technology, and I've been accepted to all but CIT, some with money involved. So I'm going to get a master's in engineering. And he said, I thought you wanted to be a dentist. And I said, well, I really do. I did, but that's going to take 4 years of dental school, and I have to pick up pre-med stuff, and I mean, it's going to be a real drag. And as far as time goes, and he says, oh, and we were in his office at the time, Bill, and he was chewing gum, and he dropped his pack of gum on the ground, and he goes, would you get that for me? And I said, yeah, sure. So I bent over to pick up his pack of gum, and he kicked me in the butt. I mean, not a little kick. I mean, he really launched me, and I went flying out out of his laboratory into the path, into his hallway, and I was down on my hands and knees. What did you do that for? And he says, Gary, he says, you never give up on your dreams, never. He says, come here, and he gets on the phone and he dials a number by memory, and it's Father John Loschiavo, who was at that time the boys' dean at University of San Francisco. And he says, okay, John, that's great, John. All right, John. John was his patient as well. And he hangs up and he says, okay, go over to USF. You have an appointment with Dr. Loschiavo over there for admissions in an hour. I go, what? And he goes, do it. So I went over to USF and sat down with Father Loschiavo, and he said, well, you're in. I go, wait a minute, wait a minute. You haven't seen any of my stuff or anything. He says, well, I'm sure that'll all pan out. And so I ended up going to USF for a year to pick up my pre-med and pre-dental and stuff that I needed. I took, I think, 22 units of solids the first semester and 21 the next semester, and qualified for dental school and went to dental school. The dental school was University of Pacific, right there in the, well, it wasn't the University of Pacific then, it was the College of Physicians and Surgeons. And it was one of the highest ranked dental schools in the nation. And so I get in there. It turned into the University of Pacific. Pacific bought it in the second year I was there, in my beginning of my junior year. So I ended up graduating from the University of the Pacific Dental School. I still owed the Navy 2 years because of my academy education. I'd given them 2. They needed 2 more. And so as soon as the ink was dry on my dental diploma, I was off to back into the Navy, and I went into the Navy down at Camp Pendleton. And Camp Pendleton, great place. It was a Marine Corps base, but Marines don't have their own physicians or dentists. So I was assigned there for 2 years. It was a great 2 years. I played golf for them and for the all Navy team while I was down there. And during my last few months that I was serving my last 2 years there, I was offered a national fellowship, as what they call an SRS fellowship, social rehabilitation fellowship, for dealing with cleft palates. And the opportunity to go to pick a school, to go to school and pick up a master's in dentistry. So I went to 4 different schools. I went to Alabama, North Carolina, Michigan, and Mayo Clinic, and I ended up choosing North Carolina. North Carolina, I don't know how USF recruits, but North Carolina recruits, if they recruit their athletes, anything like they recruited this fellowship, I don't know how they ever lose anybody. I mean, about 3 weeks before I was going on the trip, I start getting the Chapel Hill newspaper at my house in San Diego. And somebody picks me up at the airport. They bring me, like at 80 miles an hour from the airport up to the North Carolina's campus, where we go in and I see Charlie Scott's last game, with Dean Smith coaching, and I'm going, holy mackerel!
Wow.
This is this, and also they're looking at me as a grad student. I'm going, this is pretty cool. So anyway, I chose North Carolina, was there for 2 years. It was a great 2 years. Played on the school AAU team there in basketball, and we won the that AAU championship of that particular area while I was there. So it was a great 2 years there, and then I came back to San Francisco and started teaching at USF and started my own practice.
So let's talk about that. Now, where was your practice at that time?
Well, that first year I practiced in the faculty clinic that they had at the University of Pacific, and that was that was okay. But I was making an awful lot of money there, and most of it was going to the practice. So I thought I could do better than this. So I started my own practice in Mill Valley uh, after a year. That would have been in 1969 or so, and have had that practice in Mill Valley, California, for ever since then.
So this was interesting to me. So after you have this great career as a dentist in Mill Valley, you come back to USF, and somehow you're involved with being a interim AD. Now I'm very curious. How does something like that happen? Um, People must have had a really high regard for you to get everything together, because it was a kind of a disaster at that point in time.
Well, uh, Bill, I'm sure that you understand this. I've always been lucky. I've always seemed to be in the right place at the right time. I had that. My dentist kicked me in the butt just when I needed to. I for some reason was offered this fellowship at North Carolina. Um, while I was at North Carolina, I played AAU basketball, but it was like, how when you used to play on the playgrounds and there was a lot of people that wanted to play, and you had to keep winning in order to stay on the court. And if you lost your game, you had to go to the end of the line to get on the court. When I was I grew up in San Francisco, and I went to Lincoln High School. At that time, USF didn't have their own gym, and the team used to come over to USF. I mean to Lincoln High School, which had an open gym. I think on Thursday nights. I could be wrong on that. And in the USF team with Russell and Casey Jones and all that would take the court, of course, and they would never lose. And so they would practice as long as they wanted to. And so I was able to watch and play against them. Play against them is a very loose term, and so I saw that, and I was in that position, and then getting that fellowship to North Carolina was just being lucky again. Now in North Carolina, besides the basketball, we got kicked off the court once because we lost, and down at the other end of Carmichael was a volleyball court set up, and there was a bunch of guys, mostly grad students, but real good athletes playing volleyball. Now, on the West Coast, you kind of grew up playing volleyball because, particularly in San Francisco with being close to the beach. So I started playing with them, and we get into, we got to be pretty good friends, and we decided to go into the intramural championships of North Carolina in volleyball. And sure enough, in those days, you could go into intramural sports as long as you didn't go into it in the sport that you were playing for the school. So we get into the finals against the North Carolina basketball team in this volleyball tournament, and we beat them. It was a great 3-match set. And so the next year, we get in there again, and this time they're filming it, and so we're playing the volleyball against the basketball team again, and again we win in a very good match, and we're all of a sudden the team is invited to the Olympic tryouts for volleyball. And so, we went to a couple of tournaments out of state to play volleyball and to be looked at for the Olympics, right? So it's just, athletics has always been part of me, but it's, it's always just been being in the right spot at the right time. As far as USF goes, how I got into that was that in USF's golf team was not doing very well back around in the mid 2000s. It was and I never felt there was a reason for it not doing well, but in those days I was officiating for the Northern California Golf Association and the University Golf, United States Golf Association. So as an official, I had seen them play, and it was just it was it almost made you cry. It was things weren't going well. So one night, I think there might have been alcohol involved. I get a call uh, from the AD, the then AD at USF, and he says, "Gary, I'd like you to come over and take over the golf program." Now, I had golf had always been my fun sport. I had played other sports more for anyway, for other reasons, but golf had always been my kind of thing. Well, I'll just go out and have fun playing golf, but I played it fairly well, and I had played in U.S. Opens and in U.S. Senior Opens and the British Senior Open, and so I never played extremely well. I never made the cut in any of those things, but they were national championships, and I did play in them. So when Bill asked me to come in, I just laughed at him. I had never taught anybody to play golf except for my wife and my son, and so I just didn't think it was right. And he kept on, and he says, "Well, let's meet for breakfast," and we did. I gave him a list of 3 people that would make great coaches. He says, "No," he says, "You're the one." And anyway, he was smarter than I was. He phoned my wife, and she says, "Can you help him?" I, well, Quasimodo could help him. I mean, they're so not very good right now. It would be almost impossible not to help him. She said, "Well, go ahead and do it, because I'll watch the dental practice." My wife Kelly is a saint, and she also is a dentist, so she could watch the practice, if I had to be called away. So anyway, we went in as the golf coach, and I believe when we started that year, the team was 285th in the nation out of 316 or 303. But anyway, there were 16 teams worse than us in the whole nation, and that just wasn't right. And that first year, we jumped 180 spots. And the next year, we jumped another 50 spots. And all of a sudden, in the third year, we won the conference championship and went to postseason. It was just being placed in the right place at the right time. The players were not as bad as they had performed the year before, and I got lucky in recruiting the first year, and and the players that were on the team improved greatly. In fact, 2 of them ended up as all league selections before they graduated. Going from a stroke average of 75 down to 73 in the 2 years. And even more important than that, Bill, they were just class individuals. And when I started recruiting, and the recruits were better than the returning players were playing, the returning players, as when a hot freshman comes in, the people on the team can go two ways. They can get pissed off that you brought somebody in to knock them out of a job, or they can sit there and mentor the kids. And I was very fortunate, and the returning players were all class individuals, and they mentored the kids, and they taught me how important it was to have a cohesive team, even in a sport where you don't think teamwork is involved, because golf is such an individual sport. But it was, and we continued to improve, and all of a sudden, after 4 years, I thought that I had done everything that the school had asked me to do, and so I quit. Uh, at that time, we had a new AD, Debbie Gorman, who I really liked. She was uh, for me, she was very personable. She basically let me do what I had to do to improve the team and keep my nose clean, uh, Debbie had some problems in other aspects, a lot of which weren't her doing, but for me, she was great. And she says, "Well, Gary, you can't quit." And I said, "Oh, well, Debbie, I just kind of did." She says, "No, no, no, it's just, you can't quit." I said, "Debbie, the recruits are set up for the next 2 years. Uh, we just won the conference championship for a second straight year. Of my assistant coach is really good, and he'll continue." She says, "But Gary," she says, "you can't do it. This brand new coach on the men's side. You just hired a new women's coach. You've got to sit around and mentor these people." And I said, "Well, what did you have in mind?" And she says, "Well, be director of golf for for a year or 2 years." And I says, "In charge of both men's and women's programs." And I go, "Oh boy." But I'm thinking, all right, I had two brand new coaches. I could mentor them that first year. By the second year, I'm out playing golf with Bill Cartwright and other alumni, and schmoozing and collecting a check, and uh, I I still had the dental practice. I was practicing 2 days a week, Saturdays and one other day, and the USF was taking up until 10 o'clock at night every other day. So it went like I thought it would. The first year, I mentored the two other coaches. Um, the women's team did very well, and the men's team again won the conference championship. And I thought, oh boy, this is really good. Well, 1 week into the second year, uh, Debbie left with a year left on her contract and went to the University of California, and it kind of left USF in a bind. It was 1 week into the system. They didn't want to hire somebody that would leave another school at that point to come to USF. Uh, it wouldn't have said much about their character. So all of a sudden, I get a call from Charlie Cross saying, "Gary would like you to be the director of athletics." And I just laughed at him and told him no. And he, he says, "No." I says, "Look it." So I gave him a couple of names that I thought would be excellent athletic directors. And he goes, "No, no, no." And I went, "Oh man." Again, it was just being in the right place at the right time. Father, uh, you know, again, out of the old playbook, they called my wife Kelly, and she says, "Could you help him?" And I just, "Kelly, you know, I'm not trained." And she says, "Could you help him?" I go, "Well, they need help." He says, "Do it. I'll watch things." So all of a sudden, I became the interim athletic director for USF. And again, I was just in the right spot at the right time. I had good people around me. I had good coaches around me. we either came in first or second. There's a couple of ways that you can tell whether an athletic program is doing well. And there's a couple of ways that you can tell whether a coach is doing well. For an athletic department, I think your best measure for whether you're doing well or not is the Director's Cup or the Commissioner's Cup. Each conference has something like this, and basically what it is a composite of the places of all the sports that are played in that particular conference. Now, to be a D1 school, you have to have, I think, 13 or 14 sports. Maybe it's 12. But anyway, USF had 14. And so if you ended up, let's say, 10th out of all the other schools in that conference, there was, at the time, there was 10 in the conference. You then, if you finished up last, you got 1 point. You know, if you finished up first, you got 10 points. And you did that for each sport. And then at the end of it, you added up all the sports and you found out whether where you ranked. And we had just brought in BYU. So I think that first year, that year that I was the interim athletic director, we came in either first or second in the men's and third overall, pretty high up. Unfortunately, for the last 7 years until Joan McDermott has taken over, we kind of slipped every year. Every year we went down in the Commissioner's Cup ranking until I think the last year, a few years ago, we were 9th instead of 2nd. So it was things kind of fell on hard times there. But as far as coaches go, I think that the Coach of the Year honors are probably the best indicator of whether a coach is doing well. I mean, there's all sorts of reasons that you can get lots of wins. You can have good players. You can have a senior group rather than a bunch of rookie freshmen, on your team. But the Coach of the Year honors are usually voted for by your peers, the other coaches. They know when things are being done well by a coach. And we had a number of Coach of the Years people that on the staff when I took over. So it was again being in the right place at the right time. We had a great year. Fundraising went up 70%. But we've had this discussion, Bill, about the types of athletic directors there are. And there's basically 3 types. There's an athletic directors that are coaches, athletic directors. And then there's athletic directors that are more interested in budget. They're more interested in performing well for the administration of the university. And then there's those rare ones that are in between, that have their the winning athletics as a priority, and also can keep the budget intact for the university. I was not one of those. I was strictly coming from the coaching ranks. I was strictly an athletic oriented guy, and I just went to all the coaches. I said, "Tell me what you need to win, and I'll see if I can get it for you." And then I went out and fundraised the extra amount over the budget so that we could do that. And so it was just, again, being in the right place at the right time. It was just a wonderful thing, and it was a one year deal for me. A lot of the alumni had started a 1 more year campaign, and I had to tell him that it was in my contract that university couldn't ask me to do it again for a year, and I couldn't in case, and I knew myself, in case I liked the job, that I couldn't, try to get it for another year. So I was able to sit on the selection committee and disqualify myself for a second year. Thank goodness.
That's really interesting, and I have a lot of questions about that. Like, one would be is, and you talked about the difficulties of being AD, and I would have a question about how can a team like USF ever beat Pepperdine at tennis just because of the facilities. Because obviously there's, depending on where you are, you have just better facilities, you have better ability to recruit. And I guess the big thing is that, you were doing a great job in that position. Why wouldn't you want to stay there?
Well, Bill, it's, I've often thought about, should I have stayed as the golf coach? Because, I was on firm ground as a golfer and a coach. Now, the first thing I did when I was a coach was to reach out to to the venues that we have around, the Bay Area to get USF to be able to play in them. So my first was to get the ability for our team to play San Francisco golf course. Huge thing to be able to do. We had already had an agreement with the Olympic Club, but that was it, just the Olympic Club. And, so I went to the Meadow Club, which is super course in the North Bay, the first course that Alistair McKenzie designed in the United States. And we got playing privileges there. And then I realized that we didn't, because every course that we played was a private course that really weren't very receptive to us playing there on weekends. I went to the Presidio and to a course over in Marin County that always has good weather, Peacock Gap, and was able to get group memberships for our players so they could play on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. As a coach, you're only allowed 20 hours a week with the kids, or 4 days a week. So it was. I thought it was imperative to have some place for the kids to play on those days that we weren't playing at either San Francisco Olympic Club, Lake Merced, or Meadow Club. So once we had those, then when you're recruiting, you go, look at where we play. There's not a shot that you won't learn playing these different courses. And they're the best rotation of courses of anybody in the United States. So recruiting became easier. And then I really put in the time. I would go to before Europe golf was really thought of as the place to go to recruit. This was 20 years ago. I would go over for the European team championships, where the 16 countries put their 6 best players in, and they played for a week, and it was just like coaching Candyland, and I was able to get some very good recruits, particularly out of Sweden. One young lad who is just finishing up his year now, and he's, I think, something like in the top 30 or early 40s in the nation as amateurs. So I really pushed recruiting, and I got the facilities. And once you start to win, it turns out, I believe, and this is probably true in basketball as well, that recruits coming in only have about a 2-year memory. You know, they don't remember Bill Russell or Bill Cartwright or Casey Jones. They just don't. They remember what happened last year and the year before because they're that young. And so what you have to do is you have to have a winning culture for a couple of three, sustained for a couple of 3 years before you can really start to recruit the, you know, the top athletes on the basis of your record. So that's kind of where USF is now. And, you know, particularly in basketball. You know, we've had 20 win seasons for the last, I don't know, 7 years, 8 years. We had a 20-year season when I was AD. And I'd like to take credit for that, but we had a 20-year season the year before. So basically I was able to hold water on it, but not improve things an awful lot. But we're in a place now where I think we can start attracting people. You know, we get some stability in the coaching ranks. And like you've said before, what you need is that one superstar to really focus your attention on your team. And I think if we do that, we'll be great. You know, it's too bad that we lost direction, you know, for, you know, that number of years before Joan took over, because the athletic part of the athletic department, the winning, was put on the back burner or even not considered as important. And it was too bad that we kind of, you know, lost focus on all sports except for men's basketball.
Yeah, it was. Well, even in that, in the '80s, when we lost basketball for 2 years, which we've never recovered, I've always been curious that people don't really have a idea or an understanding that we've always been really a really great athletic school since, especially in basketball, since 1949 when we won the NIT. We had always finished first or second in the which was the WCAC, since when I left, all the way up to the '80s. So that was a really great run to have that kind of a standard, and then to be able to lose our momentum once the program was dropped and to bring it back, because then schools like Gonzaga stepped into the conference, and then BYU, and then St. Mary's. You know, started playing at a really high level. So it's just really hard to catch and regather your footing after being so far behind. But I've thought over the past few years, we've really done a great job of being able to put ourselves at that level. Now it's up to us to stay there. And that really goes for all the sports, whether it's girls basketball, golf, that I've, as you know, had fun watching.
Yeah, I know. I think one thing that I did want to touch on was just how you were reluctant to take the head coaching job over there in golf all those years ago. And then once you took it, I imagine you were like, hey, I better be successful at doing this, right?
You know, Steve, you know, one of the great motivators is fear of failure, right? And once I took the job, well, let me tell you a little bit about my first day on the job as the golf coach. The golf office was inside, underneath the gymnasium in a place where there was no windows. So I'm in this office, this cinder block, the paint's peeling, the the fluorescent light has a flicker in it. The previous coach had been pissed off, and he had deleted all the files from the players that were returning, and taken the paper files. So I had no clue as to who was on the team. Um, the phone had been uh, passworded, so I couldn't use it. And I'm sitting in here in this office, and going, what the hell did I do? You know, why did I agree to this? And the phone rings. And it's my first phone call, right? And I haven't been able to get out on the phone, but all of a sudden the phone rings, and you know, it was that old Freddie Couple line. I was afraid to answer because I was afraid there was somebody on the other end. And I, I went, oh, so I pick it up, and the guy says, hello, this is so-and-so. He says, my son was coming to USF as a recruit. I'm pulling him. I go, oh, geez. I says, you know, this guy's name was Sean. So I says, Sean, I says, you know, I'm sitting here in the office, and sometimes it's better just to tell the truth, but the lights are flickering, the paint's peeling, I don't have any files, I know nothing about your son. Can you tell me a little bit about him? So with that, you know, 45 minutes later, you know, I get off the phone with Sean, and he's feeling much better about sending his kid to USF. And he gives me the name of three guys that I can talk to to find out what type of player he is, because I know nothing about this kid. So I look at the three names, and one of them, at this time, I belonged to a golf club down in Pebble Beach, and one of the names was a guy that I knew from that golf course, and the other was a very kind of a famous golf instructor who I happened to know, and the third one was the high school coach, which I didn't know, but I figure, okay, I'll give him a call. So the first call that I made was to the teaching pro, the famous teaching pro, and he says, well, Gary, he says, this is about this kid, and he tells me, you know, about this kid. So the next call I make is to the high school coach, and it looks like he's reading off the same script, and I'm going, you know, can I believe what I'm hearing here? The kid is going to be an average college golfer, but he's at least an average college golfer. And but it sounds like they're reading off the same script. So, you know, I phoned this guy that I knew from Pebble Beach, and he says, well, yeah, Gary, and he gives me the same line. And at the end of it, he says, Gary, he says, you know who his father is, don't you? And I said, well, yeah, his name is Sean Toulon. And he goes, yeah, Sean Toulon. And I go, yeah. He says, do you know where Sean works? And I says, well, he mentioned that he worked for TaylorMade. And he says, yeah, he's the vice president in charge of development for TaylorMade. He's one of the powers that, in the golf industry. And I said, kid's looking awful good, and so we brought Tony in, and he was what they professed. He was a very, very good, solid player, and Sean was just thrilled with what we gave him and the chances that we gave him to play and to compete at USF. And all of a sudden, we have a full sponsorship, just like UCLA or North Carolina, with TaylorMade, worth, in those days about $25,000 a year. So I wasn't sure how good we were going to play that first year, but I knew we were going to look better than any other team on the that we were going to play against. So we got uniforms and shoes, and our kids were fitted with clubs, and it was just again, Steve, just luck, being in the right place at the right time.
I was also going to say, no, I think obviously luck is when preparation meets opportunity. But I think that another thing I found very interesting is maybe you could talk about your pursuits in running, and you did a 100-mile race. So to me, if you have that kind of determination and stamina to do that, you probably could do most things, right?
Well, yeah, but I'm limping around on a bad hip now. And, but what happened was I got into running because I was a single guy. I was living in an apartment complex and that had a lot of tennis courts. So I started playing tennis, and I got up into a B ladder type of player, and I realized that I was losing some matches because of my stamina. So I started going out and running, and in basketball, I came to realize that as much as I like the basketball part of it, I like the running better. I like the being in the shape and everything else. So shortly, running took over my over whatever I did in tennis, and I just started running, and pretty soon I was running in 5Ks and 10Ks competitions, and in 1981, I qualified for the World Championships in Masters that were held in New Zealand in the 5 and 10K. And I thought, oh man, this is kind of cool. But, as you get older, the young guys gain speed, and you certainly don't. So it just kind of morphed into to marathons, and marathons were just, Frank Shorter had just kind of made a name for himself, and my dad's track background, it just seemed like a natural for me. I just kept, running marathons, and all of a sudden I clicked with a couple of people in my demo practice that came in because I was running, and they had gone into ultra marathons. So I started running, ultra marathons, 50 milers and things like that. And the best I ever did was I ran a double marathon from Limiter Beach out there in way out in Point Reyes to underneath the Golden Gate Bridge in Fort Mason, and we it was something like 58 miles or something like that, and I came in third in my age bracket. But so but it would just seem like a lot of fun doing it in those days, and it was it got to be, the running got to be a little bit too much. I fell and hurt my hip, and I had to stop, and that was kind of the end of my running. But it increased the amount of golf I was playing. So like it just it kind of morphed from one to another. I was kind of a jack of all trades in athletics. Always good enough to make a team, but never being a star. Just had a lot of fun doing it. And
those, I have two questions. Like those are the kind of people I think who do make the best coaches, right? People who things perhaps don't come so easily to. And then I know you played golf with Bill, and he's not exactly Tiger Woods or Jack Nicklaus. I mean, no offense to Bill. What could you do to improve Bill's golf game?
Hey, let me ask you, let me ask you a question. Who is Tiger Woods or Jack Nicklaus?
Yeah. Well, Bill's really interesting. I've played with golf with a lot of guys that were and most really large people, and I think Bill qualifies to be in that group. They have trouble with, and this is no pun, they have trouble with their short game. Bill has one of the best short games that I've ever seen. For a big man like that, he's just wonderful around the greens and with his wedges and his putter in his hand. It's really remarkable to see. All Bill needs to do is to get out on the course more.
I need a good golf coach. Hey, hey, Gary, can you talk a little bit about your family? I know your son now is a golf coach.
It is. It's That's a pretty good story in itself, Bill. He was down in San Luis Obispo, and he had made the basketball team down in San Luis Obispo, and he phones up after he made the team because he was, all during the preseason. He's going, Dad. He says, I don't know about this. I mean, there's 12 guys down here that can dunk on me, and I go, well, Gary, I says, all you do is just keep working. And so he phones me up and he says, Dad, he says, I made the team. And I go, well, that's fantastic, Gary. He says, but Dad, I'm not going to take it. I said, why is that? And he goes, well, I school is the most important down here for me. I'm going to try to be a student rather than be on the team. And I said, well, okay. But when I took the USF job, he phones me up and he says, Dad, can I transfer to USF? And I go, well, sure. And he comes up and Gary's about 6'3", but he's got that basketball shape. He's got, his wingspan is 6'8", so he's got 5 extra inches of reach, and and he was always could handle the ball. So so he comes up as a golfer though, and he comes onto the team. I put him on the team, and he's kind of like out of 10, he's probably 9th man. But he wins both the matches that we put him into. Jesse Evans was our coach at that particular time, and Jesse ran into a problem. Our basketball coach, Jesse, ran into a problem with his team. He had started the team with 6 people eligible for various reasons. So Jesse comes up and he says, Doc, he says, is your son still? Is your son have eligibility? And I go, well, I said, he was in engineering at down in San Luis Obispo. When he came up here, he changed to business, and he's one course shy of having the correct number of courses as a junior to be eligible. And Jesse almost cried because he needs somebody to sit on the bench. But Gary missed out on playing D1 basketball by missing, by being one short on a new major. But he did well in golf. I said I only taught 2 people to play golf from scratch. One was my wife, who had started at 28 years old, and the other was Gary. Gary became a very fine golfer, and Kelly, my wife, has played in 4 national championships, making the cut in 2 of them. So she's a lot better golfer than I am. Gary started working in the golf industry and was back in Colorado running a golf shop for a very great golf course called Ballyneal, back on the east end of Colorado. If you ever get a chance to play it, it's a supreme course. And so he's running the shop back there. I had, when I was AD, one of the good things that I was able to do was I got a call from the director of athletics at Dominican University, and he says, Gary, he says, we've had to get rid of our basketball coach. He says, could you give me a name? And I said, well, sure, Booker Harris. USF grad, played for USF, has put in his work. He's up in Colorado at the Metro, and has done well there, and so he hires Booker, and comes down, and Booker does a wonderful job. Almost winning his conference the first year. But about 9 months later, I got a call. He says, "Coach," he said, "we need a golf coach as well. Gary, do you have a word there?" So I give him three names, and 3 months, 4 months goes by, and nothing happens. Dominican hasn't hired a golf coach. So I'm talking with my son, and I said, "Geez, I don't know what's happened." Dominican phoned me and asked me about the golf coaches, and I gave him these three names. Did I miss anybody? And he says, "Yeah, me. I'd like to come back to California." And I go, "Oh, okay." So I gave him the name, and they flew him out and hired him the next week. So Gary's been the golf coach over at Dominican. He's done very well. Dominican is an expensive school. It's almost as much as, well, it is the same as Stanford or USF, and they don't have that many scholarships. In fact, he doesn't. I think for the entire team, I think he's only got something like $10,000 to give on the scholarships, and he's going up against all these Academy of Arts and UC Santa Monterey and Chico and all these other courses that have full scholarships, and they were a lot less expensive. And somehow he does well. He probably recruits better than I ever could. And he's won Coach of the Year, which, as I said, is from your peers, and is probably the best indicator of how good of a coach he is. So I'm very proud of him. He's been there for 6 years, and runs both the men's and the women's programs. I don't know how the heck he does it, but very proud.
Awesome. Well, Gary, thank you so much. We're really happy to have you on the show. And also, what I should really thank you for is that one of the reasons I ended up at USF was because of you. You really helped me come back to USF, and I really, really appreciate that. You are a true Renaissance man in every sense of it, and you've really given me a lot of guidance. So thank you so much. Thank you for being on the show.
Well, Bill, that was, Steve, I have to tell you that quick story of how, I got asked right after I had left the AD position. I got asked by the AD, he says, "I'd like to give a talk to all the athletes, but I'd like a real headliner. And who can you think of anybody?" And I said, "Well, I had actually, when Bill was in school, I got to know his mother better than Bill. I had come back to San Francisco and had taken up some tickets to the basketball things, and gotten to know Bill's mom, who was just an absolute wonderful lady. And so I got to know Bill just a smidgen, and I knew that he was a real stand-up guy. So one phone call, and I said, "Bill, would you consider?" And he goes, "Of course. What can I do?" So as anybody that knows Bill, it didn't take any convincing at all. Bill, can I put in a commercial here?
Of course.
Okay, so we've got a book on that was just written just before COVID, called A Moral Stance. And it's the story about the football team at USF in 1951 that won that went undefeated and untied during that season and was invited to play for the national championships against Georgia Tech in the Orange Bowl. But it came with the caveat that they had to leave their 2 black players at home. And this is 1951, when that probably was correct thinking for much of the United States. No other university up to that point had ever refused that stipulation. But the team, and more importantly, the university said no. And in 1951, that was great. For the next 6 years, no other university said no to that caveat. So it was a wonderful thing that team did. That team ended up having more people in the NFL Hall of Fame than any other single team. They had the commissioner, Pete Rozelle, who was the director of publicity for that team, come out of that particular year. And they had the first African-American official in any major pro sports, Burl Toller, preceding basketball by 6 years, I think, and baseball by 10. So it's a wonderful story and moral stance. If anybody wants to pick it up, they can pick it up on Amazon.
That's amazing. Yeah. Congratulations. You wrote that too? You found time to do that in addition to everything else you're doing?
Well, yeah, I did it the last year I worked for USF. I just thought that it was a story that had to be told.
Well, Gary, thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me on, Bill.